Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Kellen here again with Droid Life. So I've got three phones in front of me right now. This is a Moto Z3 Play, this is a OnePlus 5T, and this is a Google Pixel 2 XL. So I've got all three of these up because, well, gesture navigation is about to become a big thing on Android. We know Google's implementing it into Android P, and from there, we'll probably see many manufacturers down the road do so as well. When Google does stuff, often people follow. And so I wanted to show you the three current implementations from different companies. So Google has its own that it's pushing in Android P. OnePlus introduced its own with the 5T. Now the OnePlus 6 has it. And then Motorola has been doing its own previously, though, in a physical fingerprint reader, but now they actually have it on screen, which we think they're going to do with most of their phones throughout the future. So I just want to show you some of the differences, the plus and minuses, who's getting it right, who's getting it wrong, and just let you guys in on the future of Android navigation. We're first going to start with the Google Pixel 2 XL and Android P because, well, this is Google, and when Google does something or changes something, other people often follow. So I want to show you where Google's going, what they're doing right and wrong, and then we'll talk about these other two phones. So how their gesture navigation works is you have a home button, and you can swipe up on it to get into your app switcher. If you're in an app and you want to go back, you now have a little back button over here. Now, it obviously doesn't show when you're in your home screen, but when you're within almost any other app, you're going to see there's a little back button. So you can swipe up, and that takes you to App Switcher. And down here, you'll see some recently used apps that Google thinks you may want to use. There's also Google Search in there, and then you can swipe between here and get to other apps. If you want to just jump back to the previous app you were just in, you actually just grab the home button and slide it to the right and let it go. And then it just switches you between the two most recently used apps. It works fine. You can press home to go home. You can long press on that home button to get into Google Assistant. It's one of those things I've started to get used to, but there are some issues I have here. So number one, when you're at home and you swipe up, that no longer just swipes you into the app drawer. It gets you into this UI, and that honestly just makes absolutely no sense when you're at your home screen. What you have to do is either swipe up and then swipe again, or you have to do this long drawn out swipe, and then that will swipe up into your whole app drawer. But most of us are used to just doing this flick from the home screen, and that gets us into our app drawer. That little flick no longer works. Google should fix that. And how they should fix that is when you're on the home screen, it should recognize you're on the home screen, and a flick should just get you right into here rather than your app switcher. That said, when you're in an app, it totally makes sense that a little flick would get you into this UI, because if you're within an app, you may want to switch to another app, whereas the home screen, the chances are you're either just going to tap on an icon shortcut, or you probably do want to get into your app drawer. And I'm not saying this long swipe up is the worst thing ever. It's just from a user standpoint, a quick flick is much easier than trying to do this long drag. So anyways, I would adjust that. The second thing is this back button thing is just silly. If we're talking about a gesture navigation, you can't have a back button show up that needs to be pressed separately. I'll show you this in a second, but Motorola's built this already into their gesture UI where you actually swipe this way on the home button and it goes back. So you swipe that way and it goes back just like the back button does. And that's exactly how Google should implement this. I mean, if they can make a gesture that goes this way, they can certainly make one that goes that way, and then we eliminate that back button. And then finally, another issue I have with Google's is you just have all this space down here. So obviously their new gesture navigation is taking place of their previous navigation, which was back, home, and app switcher. And so this is just slotted in there in that dedicated navigation area space. And it's just kind of a big waste of space. You should shrink this down, which Motorola has done, which I will again show you in just a second, but should shrink this down so that you just have a button that you can glance across, touch when you need to, but it shouldn't take up this much, a whole like finger width of space down there. So Google's first attempt at this isn't the worst thing I've used, but it's got some issues. This double swipe thing to get in here is not okay. Why is there still a back button? If I'm in this app switcher, I sort of feel like if I'm in an app and I swipe into the app switcher UI, it shouldn't just show me the app I was just in. It should show me the previous app before that in case that's the one I want to switch to. And I bring that up because that's the way their navigation has worked for some time. When you flip into App Switcher, it actually sort of tries to hide a little bit the app you were just in and says like, oh, you probably want to jump into a previously used app, right? And with this new UI and you swipe up on this, it shows you the app that you were just in. You can see that. So I feel like it should almost automatically rotate over and then show you this app to to choose from, but maybe that's just me. All right, so anyway, that's Google's navigation. Let's talk about OnePlus's. So with OnePlus's, you get a navigation or a gesture navigation that is actually quite a bit different than Google's. You'll notice down here there is no pill, there's no button, there's no buttons at all when you have this enabled. And how it works is full gestures. There's no back button, there's no app switcher button, there's no home button even. So if I'm in, say, Chrome and I tap on something, if I want to go back, well, there's a dedicated middle area that helps you go home and also into your app switcher. And then you can set it so that there's a back gesture area on each side of that middle. So if I swipe over here up, it actually goes back a screen. And if I swipe over on this side up, same thing. It's this little back gesture that's built onto each side. So depending on which hand you're using or which side you prefer, that's how you go back. Now to go home, again, I just kind of swipe from the middle. I just do a swipe up from bottom to top, and that takes you home. If you want to get into your app switcher, you actually do that swipe up, but you hold for a second, and then this app switcher UI pops up. So it's not a bad concept. I feel like it's slightly unintuitive since you have absolutely no buttons or anything going on down here, not even a tiny little gesture button down here. You just have to know what you're doing. And look, this is not on out of the box. You do have to go in and turn this on. So once you do, you go through a little tutorial and it helps you. I'm just saying it's not the most intuitive thing. If I'm in here and again, I want to go back, a little swipe gesture on either side, you're almost giving me too many options. The swipe up home is fine, but this swipe up and hold UI, again, not the most fluid thing, the whole swipe up and hold thing. And I know that's how Apple's doing it. I just don't know that that's the most beautiful implementation of such a thing. So one of the issues I have here is if you swipe up and hold, first of all, that animation just doesn't work. If you actually go into the tutorial for this, it shows you a swipe up and hold UI where a card almost UI follows your finger. But as you'll notice, I swipe up and hold, and then the stuff just kind of pops up out of the back. If this was a really nicely done gesture UI, I would be swiping up and holding, and a card would be following me up and then appear rather than appearing out of the back. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone. But I also have an issue because with no button, I don't know how I get into Google Assistant other than tapping on some stuff. I'm running Nova Launcher, but other than tapping on like that or a Google Assistant button or something like that, or just talking to my phone, there's no physical home button to long press on. And that's kind of a big deal. I use Google Home all the time. So if you get rid of buttons completely, that idea really, really does go away. So anyways, their UI works okay. What I did want to show you though is how I mentioned in Google's new navigation where you go into an app switcher and it just shows you the app you were just in, which I think is wrong. You'll see it here. If I'm in Chrome and I go into this app switcher, you can see Chrome actually drops down to the bottom of the screen because it's assuming I probably want to pick the next app that I had open, which I do. I'm switching apps. So again, that long press and hold, you'll see settings drops down, which I was just in, and now it offers up the most recently used app. So that's how it should work. And that's why I'm saying Google should shift over to the side when you access that as well. All right. So that's OnePlus's implementation. It's okay. I just wish there was some sort of button down here because, accessing Google Assistant is kind of a important thing. Anyway, let's dive into Motorola's now, which I think might be my favorite implementation so far. All right, so Motorola's. Now, a lot of you probably haven't seen how this works on Motorola's phone because this is one of their first phones without the fingerprint reader down there. And so they used to use that for their navigation gesture UI. And now they actually are doing it on screen with this Z3 Play. So how it works is this is a home button. So again, you can see, unlike Google, they shrunk the navigation area. At least it appears that way to me. They squished it down a little bit so you get more screen real estate to use. And then again, this is a home button. So you can long press on that and that gets you into Google Assistant. And then from there, they've done a right gesture, gets you into your app switcher. And then if I'm in, say, an app and I want to go back, there's no back button that appears like in Google's, but I just swipe over that way and it takes me back. So again, it's a swipe that way. And this is how Google should do it, right? And then if I'm in an app and I swipe that way, it takes me to the app switcher. And again, you can see I was in Chrome and I swipe this way and Chrome drops to the bottom because it assumes I want to switch to another app. Again, I feel like this is the way Google should be working as well. So I can tap on an app and that gets me in there, swipe and tap into an app. So One of the cool things that Google's does with that slide to the right is it lets you instantly jump to the next app, whereas this one you still have to slide and then tap. So it's an extra step, but it also gets you into this full experience. There is no swipe up gesture. You'll notice on this, there's no swipe up gesture to get into any other UI. If you swipe up, you just go home. And again, when I'm on the home screen, that's all I want this to do is just get me into the home screen. If I want to go into the app switcher, I like that I then just slide this way. So Motorola's actually makes a lot more sense to me than anyone so far. And I actually feel like this is how Google should implement it. I get that UI that Google has done where it shows you the app switcher horizontally with some apps you may use. I actually like that view, but I would love it if I slid this way and it popped up that view. Or as I mentioned before, if I swipe up from the home screen, I get into my app drawer. And if I'm in an app and do that swipe up, then it gets me into the app switcher. I just feel like there's some things Google could tweak there. But overall, I've been using this phone from Motorola for a while, and I immediately switched to this just to see if their gesture navigation was different or better than Google's. And I actually think that it is. You tap home if you want to. I can always get into Google Assistant if I want to. I swipe this way to get into my app switcher. I swipe this way to go back. And that's it. It's really simple. Swipe right, slide left, tap. That's it. And they could even issue another gesture upwards like Google has done. And that may just make the experience even better. But so far, Motorola is kind of the king here. So between the three different gestures, I like Google's UI and the way it looks. Their gestures just need some work and they need to get rid of that back button. For OnePlus, I just think because there's absolutely no button involved anymore, when you switch to gestures, you lose some things like the ability to launch Google Assistant. And if somebody knows a way to do that easily from that UI, please let me know. I just haven't been able to figure it out. But then Motorola kind of gets it right. They've shrunken the button down, so this area is better. The gestures actually make sense, and there's a back gesture. And it's not a confusing double swipe needed UI like Google has done. So anyways, I think this is going to be the future. Gesture navigation has totally come to Android and everyone's starting to adopt it. So wanted to show it to you. If you guys have comments, questions, or want to know anything else, we can certainly show you that. For now, we're Droid Life. Peace.